morning, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Hype, Strategic AI Use for Adult Literacy with Rachel Riggs. Wisconsin Literacy is a nonprofit literacy coalition that unites over 80 member agencies across the state to strengthen the power of learning in every community through collaboration, professional development, health, digital, and workforce literacy programs and advocacy. We expand opportunities and build a more equitable, literate Wisconsin. Just want to start with a few housekeeping notes. This is being recorded, and the recording and the slides will be available on our website by next week. We're going to ask everyone to stay muted to reduce background noise. And a little bit of a new feature today by request of our presenter is we're going to use the Q&A button for questions to the presenter. So if you look at your Zoom menu bar down at the bottom, you're looking for an icon that looks like this, the Q&A. If you don't have that icon yet, you'll probably find it in the More button. And once you find it in the More button, you can actually click and drag it to your toolbar so that it stays there. The Q&A is really handy because if you have a question that you want Rachel Riggs to answer, you can put it there, and then we don't have to sort of sift through other comments in the chat to find that question. So that's a great place to put them so that they don't get lost. You can always put comments or any tech issues that you're having in the chat. All right, so without further ado, it is my pleasure to announce our guest speaker, Rachel Riggs, someone whose work and engaging presentation style I've admired for a really long time. Rachel Riggs has a master's in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other language. She is a thought leader in AI literacy and innovation for adult leaders. She directs World Education's AI for Learning and Work initiative, overseeing diverse projects in research, teacher professional development, and digital learning. Before this role, Rachel taught ESOL in a community college's adult education program. She is passionate about promoting strategic and inclusive technology integration and leveraging educators' expertise to drive innovation with emerging technologies. Rachel moderates monthly EdTech strategy sessions and presents at national and state conferences across the country. She is currently pursuing a PhD at NC State University. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you, those of you who have your camera on, and I'm very excited to join you all for today. Is it a presentation? Yes. Do I have slides? Yes. But I really hope it is also something that you feel is a conversation in so much as we can make it one. So feel free to put questions in the Q&A, like Jamie said. Add your thoughts and reflections in the chat. I'll be monitoring those as I go along. And I really would like to hear from you guys and really tailor what we talk about today to your needs. If there's something you want to see more of or something that you want me to explain in more depth, I'm happy to do that as we're going along today. Um, Go ahead. I'm going to start us off with a little poll with some different questions. And so if you scan this QR code, if you have your mobile phone, you can scan the QR code and do these on a mobile device. Or if you want to open another tab on your computer screen and go to menti.com, you can enter the code 51773297 to join the poll. Once you get in, it's going to just keep you here because it's set up so that you're following along with me. So once I go to the next slide, you will too. And I see some people giving thumbs ups on the Mentimeter, which helps me to know that you're getting in successfully. So thank you. And looks like we got a good group getting in. You can continue to join as we're going along. So I'm going to go ahead and get to the first question, but I will keep the QR code up here and the join instructions are still up on my screen. So if you look at Zoom and you haven't joined yet, you can still join. But for those who are in the Mentimeter poll, I would love to hear. We're going to make a word cloud. So, in a word or a short phrase, what do you think when you hear AI? Anything goes, just the first thing that pops into your mind. Okay, water. Water, we'll talk a little bit about the environmental aspect today. So I'm glad that that came up early. Helpful is big. So the ones that are bigger, it means that multiple people are putting that in. So it's nice to see that some people do find AI to be a helpful, fast tool. And then we have some words that reflect maybe more hesitancy, or we could just even say reality, right? That's it's kind of scary. There's the environmental impact that we're all concerned about. Someone put in hallucinations. So that's what people, it's a word that people use to refer to inaccuracies that are generated by AI. Intimidating, someone said, which I understand and I feel every day intimidated by really just the rapid advancement of this technology. Brain mush, someone said. So there's that. I hope after today you don't think of it solely as brain mush, but I understand why you would associate, why that would be something that pops in your head when you hear AI. Addicting, controversial, creepy movie. Okay, great. Lots of interesting commentary there. And then so my next question is how often do you use chatbots? I just want to get a sense, since this is kind of what brought this topic to the fore. I want to hear from you all. How often do you use chatbots? So those can be the most popular one being ChatGPT, but then other ones are Gemini, Copilot, Claude, Pi. The list goes on and on. Those are the major ones. So let's see here. We have, okay, mostly occasionally, I want to get a good sense. So I'm going to wait for more to come in. A few never. Okay. Okay, so it looks like the majority are users of chatbots, majority of people here. We have some who have never used chatbots, and that's totally fine. We're gonna be kind of talking about what those tools are and some of the skills to use them and things like that as we go along. Although our conversation today is not limited to generative AI and chatbots. We're really talking about AI in a broader sense. But this is just helpful to know who has kind of dabbled in there and who's regularly using chatbots. Now, this is not a poll. This is just a think about what you see. So I want you just to take a look at the features that are on the right-hand side of this image or slide, and just think about what do you notice about the way that AI features are displayed for users. If you want to put in the chat what you notice, that's great too. But I just kind of want you to look and think about what is this communicating to us? What do these have in common? And I'm sure you're picking up on the little sparkles. Oh, somebody put something in the chat. I wonder if they said sparkles. Oh, communication. Okay, Evan said communication. Yeah, so we can kind of see that they're used in that way. And then Shannon put magic. Valentina put us suggestions on how to use them. And yes, and I think that's a very helpful aspect of the chatbot apps that we use is that they give lots of suggestions to help us understand what the different use cases are. Caitlin was thinking magic, sparkles, and that's what I was thinking too. So you can kind of notice that when a new AI feature pops up in the apps that we use, or even a new AI app itself, usually there are like these little sparkles that are used to indicate that something is using AI. And while it's helpful to have kind of a common indicator of when AI is part of the technology that we're using, it also is very misleading because it is meant to give this sense that these are magical features. In fact, in Canva, a popular design tool, the whole suite of AI features is called the Magic Studio. So they're all magic features. What's important for our conversation today is to ground ourselves in the reality of what AI is. And you all know that AI is not magic, and that that is a marketing ploy to get us all excited about every little new AI add-on. But AI actually is a very, very broad term that started as an academic discipline back in the 50s and has gone on to advance over time with similar to today, like little spurts of innovation and excitement and investment, and then some downtime, and then spurts and downtime. And so, what we're experiencing now around generative AI is certainly advanced and novel, but is not the first time that there's been kind of this big spurt of AI technology excitement. So I like this definition by the OECD. That's the Office of, no, Organization for Economic and Community Development, I think, something like that. A big international organization that is centered around like policy making. And the way they define this, they actually changed the definition after ChatGPT was released to add some of these words that you see in red, especially outputs, generating outputs. So AI is a machine-based system that, for explicit or implicit objectives, infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs, such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. Okay, so that's a very real definition of AI. And I want us today, as we're talking and talking about AI and the use of AI, to really ground ourselves in the um, real and the practical. Um, because to focus on AI as a force in society is important. And I want to kind of pull those into specifically our roles as educators, community organizers, leaders, supporters, caseworkers. So that's kind of what we'll try to do today is kind of look at what are some different dimensions of AI, and how can we relate those to certain principles in our tangible work. Okay, so before we get into slides, I have just a little game here. And what you see on the screen are it's really an image, but two blocks of text, A and B. They're both definitions of AI, and I want you to try to distinguish which one is AI generated, A or B. I'm going to be quiet so you can read. We have some B votes, some A votes. I love this activity type. I just like say little dots. Okay, pretty split. Okay, thank you. Mumtaz put in the chat too, and that's fine too if you want to put your responses in the chat. And someone drew, annotated. That's perfect. Okay. Okay, we are pretty divided on this. Reasonably so. So the big reveal is that A is the AI generated definition of AI, and B is a definition that I wrote. Now let's go ahead and, oh, there we go. Oh gosh, you guys. Is it showing you that A is correct? Because A is correct. But on my screen, when they highlight this, it looks like that's correct. Okay, it doesn't matter. You get the idea. Okay, and then which image here is AI generated? A or B? Okay, we're pretty split again. And that's really the point of this activity, right? Is to illustrate how challenging it is to detect AI. Nearly impossible. Yeah, Tomessa said in the chat, it's too hard to tell. I agree. That is kind of the point. So, big reveal here is that B is the AI generated image. And B came from this website that I think is so funny. It's thispersondoesn'texist.com. I don't know if that URL will work, but that's the name of the website. It is a website. The only thing it does is that every time you refresh, it's an AI generated image to illustrate that they can be very, very hyper realistic. Um, so a great way if if you're wanting to bring some of these AI concepts into training or classes, I think that's just a great website to illustrate how difficult it is to detect AI. So why did I have us detecting AI? Because while we're speaking broadly about AI, and it does go beyond generative AI and chatbots, obviously a lot of our concern in learning, in adult literacy, um, is how are these tools being used in a way that promotes or not learning? And what are adults encountering in everyday life or in the workplace or in healthcare settings that's going to that is influenced by AI, and how can we equip them to navigate that landscape? And I think that really starts with our own strategic use and skill building on the topic so that we can better support our communities. So today we're talking about strategic use of AI for adult literacy. I've already introduced myself, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Just skip that. Thank you, Jamie, for the great introduction. And so I really wanted to talk today about what a human-centered AI strategy can look like. And to me, a human-centered AI strategy from an educational perspective is a learning first approach. So it's an approach that thinks first about what learning is going to happen and then works backward toward what technology should be integrated. And it's a people first approach. So it thinks first about what the needs of humans and people and communities are, and then it works backward to integrate AI and other technologies in a way that helps us toward that goal. Today, we're going to talk about redefining the power user. So, we did a little study, and I want to introduce you to some of the participants of that study to really rethink what we call a power user. In the past, we might say that a power user of a certain app or technology is somebody who uses it really fluidly and quickly and impressively. And I think that in the age of AI, it's important to kind of shift that definition towards someone who actually uses it very skillfully and strategically and prioritizes their skilled use over speed and frequency. So I want to kind of think and break that down today in light of these three participants that I'll describe to you. And then human-centered AI strategy puts craft. So if you're a teacher, maybe that's your teaching craft. If you are a caseworker or a librarian, that craft might look different, right? But it puts your craft and your lived experience above new tools and magical shiny things. And so it really centers you as an expert and an experienced individual and someone who can make judgment calls and decisions about when technology should be integrated. And all of this is to kind of cut through the hype and the marketing and get down to the nitty-gritty. So when we talk about redefining power users, I'm going to be using two tools. One is a framework for AI integration, and the other are some personas that we have developed based on a research study that we did in adult literacy. So I'll introduce to you first the framework, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the study, and then we'll get into the content. So the framework has 6 dimensions, our AI integration framework. It was co-developed with some students at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. It's informed by literature and resources from different sources, and it's really meant to infuse a human component. And so when you go to the website and explore the framework, it gives you kind of 2 paths. It gives you questions, I'm down here, questions to ask about a given tool. So maybe you're talking to a company and you want to know more about how they designed their AI. It's important to think about integration in relation to the technology design itself. It also gives questions to consider regarding human capacity to leverage that tool effectively. And so, really thinking about addressing it from what is the tool, what is the innovation, and how can we evaluate that? But also, who are the humans that are going to be working with AI, and how can we look at the dimension from that perspective as well? And this framework is used just among teams. A lot of administrators use it to spark discussion about putting in place certain principles around AI use for their organizations. And some use it for professional development, so it can be used flexibly. And we hope that you'll find it useful and integrate it into your work as well. And then the second source that we're pulling from today are these human-centered examples of AI in adult literacy. So we went through the process of designing a training. And so we co-designed a training with a group of adult education and literacy professionals and administrators in Texas. Then we launched the training and did the training and gathered a lot of data from it, analyzed the data, and then we actually returned 6 months later, 6 months later, to 3 people who were kind of the what we might redefine as the power users, right? So they had showcased their work at a conference, and we went back and interviewed them just to kind of better understand from training to then actual use in your routines, what is the difference? So we have a report that's coming out soon. This is the model that we used for the research. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but again, if you want to know more, let me know in the Q&A and I can dive more into that. But what's important just to know is that what I'll be introducing today are those showcase personas from our interviews that really highlight actual what we call power use that is skillful and strategic. So let's dive into the dimensions of the framework. So the first dimension is AI capabilities and learning goals. And this really is meant to address what can AI do to engage learners, extend learning, or enhance learning. And we can say learning in an educational setting. We could also swap that out, I think, with some different terms, but the underlying principle is the same. How does what AI can do relate with what the goals are of my practice? Okay, so that's the first dimension. And so we really want to think about what is here? What is here in the middle between what AI can do and what promotes learning or what promotes health or maybe what promotes community involvement, right? So what is in the middle there? And the best way to understand that is to have a really clear vision of what those goals are and a clear vision of what AI can do. We know in a learning context, in an adult literacy context, that contextualizing is really critical for adult learning. That means that we take the skills, the academic skills like reading and writing and math that learners need, and we put them in real world context so that the learning is relevant and engaging for adult learners. So in this example, we had one of our participants use a chatbot to contextualize a reading skill. This participant, their program does a monthly theme, And so they were thinking, well, how can I use the skill that I'm teaching, which is scanning when you're reading, and put it into the context of that monthly theme to give something really contextualized and relevant and interesting. And so they used a chatbot, they used ChatGPT to develop a lesson plan. And then they use different AI features in Canva to create a kind of controlled website environment. They wanted to do scanning in a website to also bring in some of that digital literacy. So they used Canva's AI features to take what the chatbot had developed for the lesson plan and turn that into an actual artifact for the scanning. And then they used some AI features in Google Forms to develop a short knowledge check that would check how learners picked up information from the scanning, and they put that into a Google form. And then the educator put a Creative Commons license on all of this to let others know how they could use and reuse these artifacts. So contextualizing here is the learning goal, right? It's the thing that we know works really well for learning. And where we see overlap is we know, first of all, that chatbots are good at developing writing, especially writing in different genres and organized writing, and writing with some creative element. And so what we see is that the use of a chatbot is wise for contextualizing because they have access to these large language data sets, and they can take some, information that they have on reading skills and turn that into something contextualized for a lesson plan and put it out in a very organized manner. So, those are some of the ways that a chatbot can help with this goal of contextualizing. Canva and Canva's different AI tools are really geared toward design. And so in this case, we know that something um, scaffolded is helpful for learning. Something that's colorful and well organized is really helpful. So in this case, using AI was more about giving them that scaffolded scanning experience in that controlled. It's essentially a document. It looks like a web page, but it's actually essentially a document that the teacher created. And then we know that good learning usually has frequent opportunities for checking knowledge and getting feedback on how the learning is going. And so there, it's helpful to use knowledge checks, and AI is pretty good at taking certain learning objectives and developing questions around those with human oversight, of course. Another thing we know works really well for adults is to differentiate. So that means providing materials at the right level for different learners. And we see this a lot in adult literacy when people are re-leveling text. I'm actually curious if any of you have used AI in this way, those of you who are using chatbots. I hear about this a lot from the field. So people might take a text like one of the passages from readingskillsfortoday.com, which is a library of different leveled readers for adults, and they might put it into an app like Hemingway Editor. And Hemingway Editor will use AI to analyze that text and tell you what aspects of the passage are hard to read and what changes you could make to change the readability level. So you could make it more complex to bump it up to a different readability grade level, or you can simplify it to bump it down. A lot of people use chatbots for this task, and they might just say, hey, simplify the history of pizza passage. I like Hemingway better because it gives you a little more control over what you change. So that's just a preference. I like to have a little more insight into what about it is complex and what can I change, but a chatbot also works for this purpose. So another example of how something AI can do is helpful and does actually produce good learning. Okay, so that's our first dimension, right? Really aligning what AI can do with what we're trying to do, essentially. The next dimension is mitigating biases. And so we know that AI is trained on data that is already skewed in a certain direction. And then furthermore, the models and the apps are designed by people and companies that also might have skewed perspectives. And so everywhere along the development process of an AI model and an AI app and an AI feature, there may be areas where it's just bias is baked in, a skew towards some viewpoint, a skew towards some perception that then can come out in the output that it produces. So really the questions here is what has AI learned about learners and learning? So if you're in adult literacy, that's the question, right? What does it know about adults at literacy levels? And what does it know about effective ways to support adults in their literacy? And I think one of the big questions here is how do educators complement that? So if we know that AI is skewed in a certain way, what is it that we add to the picture in human-centered AI use that can help make sure that the ways that we implement AI are not also skewed? One of the key things is just to know the limitations and complement those with your own skills. And I use here the term interaction skills. I'm curious, let me know in the chat. Has anybody heard that term before, interaction skills? And actually, let's guess. Let's do like a little prediction activity. What do you think interaction skills might be referring to in the context of using generative AI? What do you think an interaction skill would be? Yeah, exactly. You guys got it. I like that term. I find it to be very intuitive. It's the skills that we use to interact with AI. Exactly. So exactly what you guys are putting. Communication, prompting, interpreting results, refining a prompt, reacting to a prompt, how you ask your question. Those are all interaction skills. And so I like this visual example, although it's important to know that bias is baked into AI, even if the output is text, but it's easy to see it visually, right? So here I used the prompt adult learner. And this was in Padlet's I Can't Draw feature. It was some years ago, so it's possible that they've kind of diversified this a little bit. But I got a lot of young white men as adult learners. That was what most of the results were, which is great. There are young white men who are adult learners. But I wanted to see how I could add more representation to the images that I was using. And I thought, well, actually, I have an older Black man in my class, and we use mobile phones for a lot of our activities, polls and things like that, rather than pen and paper. So I thought, well, let me see how I can change this up. And so I just made the prompt more detailed as to what I was looking for. So this is where I think it's important to remember how our skills are the human component of mitigating bias. That the bias for in a lot of AI tools and models is kind of baked into the technology and part of what some very large technology companies might skew towards. So when we build our skills, we can actually kind of have more control over what that looks like. So I like this. This is a good, this is actually a whole book. And the idea of interaction skills comes from one chapter of this book. But if you want to check that out later, the link is there. So this interaction skills are largely based on prompting. So some general prompt writing tips, and those of you who are using AI a lot, let us know in the chat what other tips that you have. These are not comprehensive, but I think they're some of the best tips. Use a prompt framework or formula to remember which details to include. That's number one. So this is one example. There are plenty of these out there, and I really don't find them to be all that different. Um, what the key here is to have some framework or vision in your mind of like, okay, what should I add to a prompt? Some kind of recipe like that. Not to fixate on the exact formula and like get too scientific about it. I think it's more of an art than a science. So so this is one that I use and I introduce, and there are plenty out there that are also useful. So this one is comprised of these 5 parts. The acronym is RACEF. And so the first one is role, that's the R. And so you give the chatbot a role, like you are and it can be your role. So it can be something like you are an adult literacy tutor. Or it can be the role that where you feel like you have some kind of gap or weakness and you want it to kind of push further into its knowledge base on something. So like if I'm writing a digital literacy lesson, maybe I want it to be like an IT specialist because I want to kind of get more accuracy on the technical and mechanical components where I know I'm going to do well with the learning pieces. You know what I mean? So it can be your role if you want it just to be kind of a little thought partner with you, or it can be the role that, you wish you had that person to kind of weigh in. And then action, that's the A. So generate a blank. What do you want it to do? Generate a quiz, generate a lesson plan, give me some ideas for something. What's the action you want it to take? And then the context is the C. What should it know about your environment, about the people you're working with, in order to give you a better output? So, in this case, if I'm thinking about lesson materials, I might tell it that I'm facilitating the lesson over Zoom so that it kind of knows that it's a digital learning experience and I'll have chat, but we might not have paper and pencil, right? So just those kinds of little pieces of context. You can give it an example. Sometimes it's hard to, if you don't have any examples, but you can, like, if you're writing a learning objective or you're coming up with a fun title, you could give it a few examples of like, this is a title I used in the past and I like the tone of it. So that might help. And then a format. So put it out like this, like a bulleted list or 5 paragraphs or a structured lesson plan. Tell it the format that you want it in. So this is a helpful framework. And yeah, I think just remembering what are the details to include. And then I'll jump down to this one is important, right? You want to make sure that you are saying first what you want it to do. So this is that role in action and saying last what you want it to do. Because it pays most attention to what comes first and last in your prompt. So you don't want to give it the demand at the top, generate a quiz, and then go on and on about what they're learning and what motivates them and this is what I'm struggling through and then never say output the quiz. So make sure that you have that sandwich where the bread is the task or the action and you say it at the top and at the bottom of your prompt. And then finally iterate and refine. So with chatbots it's more of an interaction, hence interaction skills. And so you can keep refining and iterating on that as you go along. And even over time, if you're using a chatbot over time, you're going to find that some elements, are not useful or important. Okay, I see something in the chat. Review, edit, or translate are also possible. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So I think Mojde, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I'm sorry, is mentioning that you don't always you're not always generating something from scratch. It could be that you already have something and you upload it and you want it to review it or edit it or translate it. And that's a great point. So this is our first persona here, Trevor. And Trevor is one of the educators who participated in the AI for adult education and literacy training that we did in Texas. And I call Trevor the learner-centered synthesizer. Trevor was very concerned about meeting the needs of the learners that he was working with. And he happened to be working with a very diverse group. So not just different levels within a subject. So he had some English language learners that he was working with, but also mixing English language learners with native English speakers who were also learning reading skills. So just a very diverse group with different learning goals and different life goals. And so he was very motivated to kind of think about how he could use AI to support them. He is the one who did that Canva activity, that contextualizing Canva activity in the training. That was part of the assignments we gave them and what he worked on. Um, and I call him the synthesizer because mixes and matches just tons of different tools to really get that great end product for his learners. So during the training, he was experimenting with a lot of different tools, as you saw, right? The chatbot, and then the Canva tools, and then the Google Forms features. So really mixing and matching to develop a really good learning experience. And when we came back to him 6 months later to talk to him more about his actual use, he said that he had really settled into using chatbots because he was finding that some of the specialized lesson planning tools like Magic School AI is one of them, Brisk AI, he was finding that they weren't great for adult learners. So really he found that bias toward K-12 and higher education. And so his way of mitigating that bias was just to lean into prompting and chatbots more so. So not to say right or wrong, I think those tools are useful for people, but just sharing what Trevor's experience was. And then another thing he did that was interesting is that he really kept track of those detailed prompts. So after he learned the RACEF framework and learned some prompting strategies, he implemented those, but then also kept them and returned to them so that he didn't have to start from scratch every time. He kind of had these templates that he would reuse, which I think is a really clever prompting strategy. So this is a quote from Trevor. I need resources with simple language but targeted for adult audiences, and that is something that's not out there a lot for adult education, for ESL, English for Speakers of Other Languages. So some of the to me, like the markers of power use here that we can take from Trevor is to mix and match different tools and uses to meet the needs of learners, and to also carefully consider what's meaningful and relevant for adults and how you're working maybe in a unique space in adult literacy, and more generic products might not be tailored to that space. He was also not using any of the big tech chatbots, and I can't remember which chatbot he was using, but it was very niche and it was not by any of the big tech companies, and it was targeted toward providing like more security in chatbot conversations. So I'll need to dig up what the name of it was, but I thought that was also interesting that he was really just yeah, using a totally different tool than the common ones. So our next, so that's AI capabilities and learning goals, and then mitigating biases, and then Trevor's example of how he's doing both of those things. The next dimension is ethics and data use. And so here we're thinking about what is responsible development, deployment, and use. So development on the side of the vendors of these tools, and then deployment and use on our side as implementers of the tools. And this is where I think a lot of the ethical questions, the moral dilemmas come into play around the environment, um, learners' data, DeepSeek. Yeah, thanks, Tomasa. DeepSeek is another one. Thank you. Um, the environment, learners' data, and intellectual property, I think, are the three big ones. And so the environmental concerns we have around AI are really around the data centers of large tech companies. So we shouldn't apply that to all AI. There's actually offline language models. There are small language models that require less energy. So we should really be thinking about large tech companies and the things that they do and policy and regulation when we think about the environment. But there are things we can do on an individual level for sure. Um, to help out, right? Just like we recycle our cans. And then learners' data, the concern there is who has the data and what are they doing with it. And there's a great resource. It's called the Data Detox Kit, datadetoxkit.org. Um, so if you are concerned about learners' data and you want to kind of walk through their digital footprint with them, um, I think that can be a really informative experience and also something really practical to help them make decisions about what data they want out there. And, you can pretty much assume at this point that data that you have online is being used to train AI. There's not a lot of transparency around that, so I can't say, this website, if you put something here and you have your account settings to this and it goes out like this, then it's not being used. I can't get that into detail. But I think a good general assumption is that if it's online, it's being used for AI. And then intellectual property. So, thinking about, I read something recently about there's one man who contributed so much to Wikipedia. They had actually tabulated like all the articles and hours that he spent contributing to Wikipedia. And if you don't know this, Wikipedia is a big source for ChatGPT and other language models, because it's all open source. So they get a lot of language and information from Wikipedia. And so it kind of raises this question of like, okay, well, if this guy contributed so much to Wikipedia and you guys are using Wikipedia now, what's he getting out of the deal? So there's a lot of questions like that around intellectual property, from Wikipedia articles to artwork and photography, and all of those issues. Okay. It is not reliable. Um, you'll have to expand on that comment. It is not reliable. I'm not sure what you mean by that. So let me know a little bit more in the chat. But yeah, I mean, in many ways, it's not like in the sense of having very clear parameters and rules around what we do and transparency. We cannot rely on the information that we have. It's very limited. Um, oh, I see what you mean. If it uses Wikipedia. Okay, okay. And then to Mesa adds, yeah, you still need to fact check. Yes, absolutely. So it's actually not just because it uses Wikipedia, it's the way that language models work. They work off of probability. And so they're really putting words together, not necessarily giving facts and information. They synthesize the language on Wikipedia and make predictions about what words go with what words, essentially. Um, and so that's where the hallucinations and inaccuracy comes in. It can be from the source data, but it's also just because of the mechanisms of how the AI model works. That they're not motivated to give you factual information. They're motivated to give you something that sounds like natural language. So some ways that we can do our part, one I think is just to apply some of the waste management principles that we might use in everyday life to our use of AI. So we can prevent, reduce, reuse, recycle. We can, in these examples, reusing and recycling, if you're using AI, could mean that you're keeping your AI generated stuff very organized and so that you can reuse it. So are you generating images and putting them into a folder structure with a nice file name and keeping track of them so that you can effectively reuse them in the future? So that's this first example. This is an AI generated image library, right? So if we're using AI to generate all these images, why not keep them nice and organized and then even share them so that they can get reused and we're not all generating the same thing using AI and wasting resources in that way. You can also recycle. And in the educational world, I think of recycling as developing open educational resources. So putting like Creative Commons licenses on your resources so that others know how they can reuse them, and if they can remix them and things. And so yeah, just all of these are kind of meant to give you the sense of how can you promote reuse and recycling of the stuff that you're generating with AI. And then ease of use, how can AI be integrated in a way that benefits everyone? And here I think about our principles of digital inclusion. So do people have the devices, the connectivity, and the literacy to participate in AI use in the way that you are. And this brings me to our second one, Nora. Nora, I call the collaborative creator. Nora, when she was in the training, she developed contextualized English language learning lesson plans. And then when we went back 6 months later, she was organizing those into a shared library for the teachers and tutors in her program. And so she says, overall, we use it for creating the material that support the teachers, and we're available for any teachers that want to learn. And here, I think the power use is around being motivated to collaborate and hear from others is a very human-centered way to integrate AI, and then developing organized repositories for other teachers to use. So now we're getting to the last two, and then I definitely want to leave time for questions. So, evidence of impact, what's known and tested about integrating AI in this way? And that's about examining the tools. We do different pilots of AI tools in adult literacy settings. One of them is Pace AI that we've been studying. And so I think just thinking about like what can you know about the tool, whether it's from a report or if it's from a colleague or it's from testimonials on the website, like how do we know that tool works in the way we want it to work? And then also using your knowledge of what works. And so this is a more like teacher-driven framework, but it's the idea of pulling together our technological knowledge, what we know about AI, with our content knowledge, what we know about literacy, and pedagogical or andragogical knowledge, what we know about adults. And so, right in the middle there would be where adult learning happens, and we can combine all of those components. And our last one is on human oversight and over-reliance. So, how do we ensure humans are involved in meaningful ways? And I think one of the first things we can do here is to know when generative AI isn't the solution, as much as knowing when it is. So, for simple math, that is not, we can use calculators to do simple calculations. And so, just thinking about, okay, well, maybe I don't need to use it to calculate a total of what I put in this invoice because I can use a spreadsheet or I can use a calculator to do that. Um, and then Wikipediaable information. What's the history of the term social capital? Social capital. If these chatbots have so much training on these resources that are out on the internet, we can always go to those sources to find and extract key pieces of information that we need. So kind of knowing when it isn't the solution, and then also knowing how to collaborate with AI. So there are things we can do on the human end ourselves, and then that AI can do in an automated way. And then what is the augmentation that can happen? In other words, how can I collaborate with AI in the things that I'm doing rather than relying on it too much, or on the other side, not relying on it at all? How can I use it as a really effective tool? And our final persona here is Ben. And Ben is what I call the skeptical problem solver. He came in very anxious about using AI and very skeptical. And then he got very excited in the training about some of the lesson creation tools and stuff. And when we went back 6 months later, he really wasn't using AI that often. He just said, I don't find a very good use for it. I'm still very concerned about the ethical concerns that I have. He has a lot of friends who are artists, which is kind of what this image is based on. And so he didn't really like the idea of using it too much. He did say that there was one big problem that they couldn't solve at work. And this is the quote here. He said, I went to Gemini and said, okay, I know nothing about this. It didn't solve my problem, but it did start me on the journey when I had nowhere to start. And so he went to it just to get some ideas. And he said he used it maybe once a month, but he just didn't find that it had a lot of use for him. Um, so some things we can learn from Ben is that experimenting with AI reduced his anxiety overall, but also validated his concerns about reliability and ethics. So I would say even if you're very concerned, maybe if you experiment with it a little bit just to see where it does fit, that might be a good path for you. And like I said, he uses it occasionally for research or to create presentations. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to check the Q&A, and we have just a few more minutes. Oh, okay, great. There's a great question here. And yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. The question says, could you please address when to purchase private AI licenses? When should we be concerned with security? Um, Lily, I think you should be concerned with security. So if there's a way for to purchase a license, whether it's one agency purchasing a license for their agency or some kind of collaborative license, I don't know. But I think that is the best way to go. Oh, thanks, Jamie. Okay, I have one. Thanks. Um, I think you should be concerned about security, and purchasing a license is a good solution to help with that. Because you do get more security. You don't just get more security from licenses, you get a lot more features and a lot more yield from the product. I would say free generative AI tools will give you just a little bit. But once you get into a paid license, there's a lot more you can do around tweaking settings, right? So giving it like custom instructions for how you want it to interact all the time. There's that little plus sign where you can attach files. You can't do that with all the free versions. So, if it's possible to allocate some budget toward paid licenses, especially if you're supporting tutors or other educators, I would say that that's a good way to go. You don't, it's best for them. That was another thing that surfaced in our research was just that teachers really need support in terms of a paid license at the organization level to use it and be really productive and efficient with it. So, okay, sorry, that was a long answer, but hopefully I didn't leave anything undone there. Any other questions? I do have another set of slides, but I wanted to kind of pause and give you guys a minute. What AI program people use? I always go to ChatGPT, but what do you think of the others? That's a great question, Marcia. Actually, one of my slides, I'll just jump to it, is a list of different AI tools. My recommendation is to experiment and see what you like. And think about what ChatGPT is great. I would say it's one of the best, especially if you're doing a lot of writing. However, if you have a Google suite and you're doing everything in Google, then I would recommend using Gemini because then it can be connected to your Google Drive. And so it's easier for you to retrieve. Like, let's say I wanted to um, write a workshop outline. What I might do is I would grab the meeting notes from when Jamie and I met to talk about the workshop and plan it, and those are in my Google Drive, so I can just really easily attach those in Gemini and say, "Hey, help me with this outline." Um, I'll pop up the list of tools here in case that brings up more ideas or questions. But please, others, uh, I would love for you guys to also share with um, Marcia what you guys are using. I'm gonna get ahead to that. Here it is. Yeah, great. Yeah, people love Claude. I don't use Claude a lot, um, but I hear really great things about Claude all the time. Okay, Valentina asked in the Q&A, are there any resources or research you might know of regarding using AI in communication? For example, to use with with population with certain disabilities or that have difficulties reading or writing? Yes, Valentina, I can share more after the session. One thing I'll say is that there's a lot of work that has been done around readability of digital text. And so, if we're thinking about people who might have difficulties reading, one great intervention is to support them with customizing the display of digital text. And some tools that help with that, one is Microsoft's Immersive Reader. So if you have something in a Microsoft Word document, you have access to a tool that's called Microsoft's Immersive Reader that will read the words aloud. It'll help you adjust spacing and and font and things like that that help with readability. So I can send you some of those readability reports. We've done some field testing with a tool called Adobe Liquid Mode. So it's actually in Adobe Acrobat Reader that most people have. And so if you pull up a PDF and you put it in liquid mode, you can customize the digital text for readability. So I think that's one great use of AI for that specific purpose that you're mentioning. Um, I'm trying to think what else. And then, the other thing I'll say about AI is that it helps to get things in different modalities. So if somebody has difficulty writing, can they dictate? AI really helps with that. Um, it helps with just turning like written into audio so that people who have issues with either thing can have the other thing, right? So, um, an example of that, there's ChatGPT Voice where you can dictate into ChatGPT what you need. So requires less writing. A lot of people use natural readers. That's actually here, natural readers, to turn text into audio. Pace AI has an immersive reader. So if you're working with English language learners, it's a good app for that as well. So yeah, okay. I could go on and on, so I'm gonna consider that one answered, but let me know if I missed anything. Oh yeah, sure. Good. Sorry, thank you. Anything else before we go through these last slides? And so I'll just kind of talk through this slide for you a little bit. I highlighted the top one because we're finding that people who are using AI are getting the most out of pairing interaction skills with these more general purpose tools. So the benefits of some of like the lesson planning tools that are more specialized is that you don't have to do as much in terms of prompting. But then that brings with it a whole suite of limitations. And I think in the adult literacy nonprofit world, one of those limitations is that we often are filling multiple roles. So we're acting like project managers, communications and outreach specialists, instructional designers. So we have a lot of different roles. And I think the good thing about these general workplace tools and chatbots is that we can do a lot of different things with them if we have the right interaction skills to work with them. So that's why I have that highlighted. But there are, of course, different tools for teaching and learning, for engagement, adaptive learning platforms, design tools, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap us up with these final slides. If you have any other questions, ideas about the framework, feel free to keep processing those in the Q&A or in the chat. But now that we've kind of talked about, okay, what is a power user? A power user is someone who uses AI strategically and skillfully and with a good balance of human AI collaboration. So what does that look like? This is kind of just a little conceptual workflow here of identifying the problem. Like, what is it that's bringing you to AI? I think a lot of times today it's, well, I'm using AI because I've heard about it so much and I'm curious. But I think take that a step further. What have you heard AI can do? And so then how does that meet your needs or solve a problem for you? Then you're really well suited to evaluate whether it's a good tool for you to use. So what's the problem? Will using AI reasonably help solve the problem? What skills, knowledge, and awareness do I need to use it well? And then after you've experimented with it, is it a good outcome? Did it help me solve the problem that I was working on? And a lot of that starts with choosing the right tool. There are lots of different kinds of tools out there. There are administrative tools that can help with analyzing data, doing, program evaluation type of stuff, doing communication stuff. There are different teaching tools, and then tools that are learner facing, to give individualized and personalized practice. I've already shown you the list of tools. So yeah, just thinking about, I think experiment with some different tools and then choose the right tools for what you're trying to get done. Build your interaction skills. I think this is really important, whether you're using um, if you're just doing image generating or, if you're using it in a very narrow way, I still think it's important to build up these skills around prompting and evaluating outputs from AI. And a lot of that boils down to really kind of having a basic understanding of how AI works. Like we've talked about earlier with the reliability and the Wikipedia data and the hallucinations, right? Just knowing a little bit about what it's trained on and what it's supposed to do. In the case of large language models, like I said, it's supposed to just be giving you something that sounds pretty reasonable and accurate without targeting accuracy specifically. That can help you know where to focus your energy with these interaction skills. We do have an open prompt book I wanted to share with you guys. This is just a book of different prompts that we do a training called Camp GPT that gathers people together to oh, that's a bad link. Hold on. Um, to experiment with AI and write different prompts and stuff. And the first one that we ever ran a few years ago, we compiled all of those into this prompt book just to try share out like these are the different use cases that adult literacy educators are, like why they're using AI and how they're using it. Some examples of what a prompt would look like. And then some of them even include a link to the conversation or it'll have a quote with that educator's reflection on why they used AI or how it went. Um, and then we have some other resources. We have the prompt book I shared, the AI integration framework that we walked through. There is a whole website that you can navigate on the framework. We have a crash course that is I would say it's more educator, teacher facing, but covers some prompting stuff, evaluating outputs kind of stuff as well. So it's just a micro learning thing that you can do. We have this brief. It's called AI Literacy Matters. I actually think for this group, this will be an interesting resource. This talks about the way that AI literacy overlaps with other literacies. So, if you're, for example, focusing on helping people build financial literacy, this will give you a one pager on where AI might pop up in the topics or the technology, and then what AI literacy might look like in that area. So, if you're, maybe your focus area is one of these financial literacy, health literacy. I think this resource could be a good reference for you. I'm going to put that in the chat. And what's the last one? Oh, and then we have a whole digital skills library that includes full lessons and curricula on AI. So if you want, you're maybe in a more like caseworker type of role and you want to just be able to refer people to stuff, our digital skills library has digital literacy stuff, but it also has a lot of AI stuff now. So you can see different lessons from AI for education lessons, AI literacy lessons from students. I think these are from, I don't remember the source of these. Yeah, Common Sense Education. So, um, just yeah, more resources for you. And that is all I have. I want to continue. I know we still have 6 minutes, so I want to keep taking any questions that you have, but I'll keep this up too in case a question pops up for you on, Friday morning. You can email me. Um, Yes, Lori. Lori asked, will we receive these slides? Absolutely. I'll send them to Jamie, and I think Jamie will know how to get them to all of you. Yeah, great. Cool. On Wisconsin Literacy's website next week. Any other questions or thoughts? You can ask questions anonymously in the
I
Q&A.
had
So,
one.
yeah, please.
You mentioned that the way that you sometimes taught was asking like real-time questions for engagement from your students on your cell phones. And I teach in a very similar way. I use WhatsApp for that. What are some resources so that I can just be better at generating, real-time engagement with my students through their cell phones during class?
Oh yeah, great question. Okay. So, one I would say because it's free and there's some specific features I like about it. One would be a Google form. So it's not real time like you're seeing the results real, but what I like about a Google form is you can do like a KWL for your students, have them enter what do they know, what do they want to know, and then you can pop into the results mode and show them what the results were across the class. And I like that because I also feel like Google Forms is something they can use. So it kind of gives them a glimpse at how they could use a form to gather information and then look at data. So Google Forms is one idea. Another more live one, I used Mentimeter today. So if you have you can get a free Mentimeter account. There's always Kahoot. Kahoot is probably the most popular of those tools. Oh, great. Okay, thanks, Jamie. I don't use Microsoft a lot, so that's always my blind spot. Microsoft Forms has present mode, so you can see answers come in live. So that's even better than Google Forms because they don't have that live feature. Um, let's see, Padlet. I really like Padlet. It's pretty mobile friendly depending on how you set up the Padlet. But what's cool about that is it's more like a collaboration space, and so oh, okay. So it's not exactly quizzing, but there's a lot more that you can do with it. Have people post images or like audio clips of themselves and stuff like that. So those are some ideas. I don't know. Let me know in the chat if that was helpful or not. KWL is it's a chart that is used for kind of prompting um metacognition, like having learners kind of plan for and monitor their learning. And so what you do is you put up a KWL chart, you have them fill out before the lesson. What do you know? That's the K. What do you want to know? That's the W. Then they put it away. And then at the end of the lesson, they reflect. What did you learn? That's the L. And then some people do an H. I forget what the H stands for. There's also a KWLH. If anybody remembers what the H is for, let me know. How will you learn it, I think, or something? I don't know. Yeah, sure. There's some great templates for that too. On the Digital Learning Selector website. Let me write that down. I'll send that out in the resources I send at the end. It has just great templates that you can use in like Google Slides or PowerPoint. For creating a KWL chart, but they also have other ones like templates for the 6 thinking hats and concept maps and all kinds of stuff. Send out digital learning selector link. There were a lot of things I mentioned today. If I mentioned something and you didn't catch the URL, let me know. I'm putting datadetoxkit.org. I'll send that in a link too. Any other questions? What questions do you have?
All right, I'm going to start wrapping up, but if people have questions, don't let me stop you. Rachel, I want to thank you so much. There's a reason people want these slides. That was so much great information, and we're going to need to unpack that probably for the rest of this week. So thank you so much. Thank you all for attending Beyond the Hype Strategic AI Use for Adult Literacy. Our next session happens at 1 p.m. today. It's virtual tutoring in practice, tools, strategies, and real-world lessons. Just want to let everybody know when you leave this Zoom call, you'll be prompted to click continue to a survey. We really appreciate your feedback and it helps us develop our professional development for the year. Thanks again to Rachel Riggs. Have a great rest of your day.